Calling the Ishvalan Survivors a military faction isn't quite accurate, but they do represent a force that shaped the Amestrian politics and military strategy for decades. They deserve a complete analysis. The Ashvillans weren't originally a military power. They were a religious group that was living in the eastern desert of Amestris. They were practicing a faith based on the teachings of Ishvala that prohibited alchemy as blasphemy against the natural order of creation. This is something similar to what would happen if there were a cult that did the same today. But here is where things get interesting. The Amestris decided that the Ishvalan region's strategic resources were more valuable than its people, and thanks to that, it created an incident that justified military intervention and launched the Ishvalan War of Extermination. The Amestris military, including the state alchemists, who would later be haunted by their actions, destroyed Ishvalan civilization. From cities, cultural sites, and population, everything was either displaced or killed. It wasn't war, it was genocide in uniform. The survivors who remained didn't even have a formal military structure, but they organized resistance cells and maintained their cultural identity despite Amestris' best efforts to erase them. Scar is the most prominent Ishvalan character who embodies the survivor mindset. He is a warrior monk whose entire family was killed by the state alchemists, and he has spent years hunting down and executing alchemists who were responsible for genocide. Scar's destructive alchemy is fascinating because it has a power that has not been seen before. Traditional alchemy has three-step processes, including comprehension, deconstruction, and reconstruction. However, Scar only had 2 steps, which allowed him to destroy anything he touched on a molecular level. His right arm is covered in tattoos that contain alchemical arrays that turn him into a walking, talking weapon that is capable of obliterating even the strong alchemists. They are not the strongest faction in raw combat power, but their authority and knowledge make them quite destructive, even when we talk about fighting against the strongest of the strongest. The Drachma represents the external threat that justifies Amestris' massive military budget and gives the government convenient excuses for its extremist policies. They are located in the north of Amestris, beyond the mountain range where Fort Briggs stands guard. Drachma is in a perpetual cold war with its southern neighbor. Throughout the series, we don't see much of this faction's internal structure, but we do see a lot of things that suggest there's a military powerhouse that adapted to Arctic warfare. Drachma's soldiers are equipped for sustained operations even in brutal cold, and their tactics emphasize raids and probing attacks rather than massive frontal assaults like a lot of other organizations do. The philosophical approach toward war is what differentiates them from Amestris. While Amestris' military force emphasizes overwhelming force and state alchemist superweapons, Drachma seems to focus on their traditional military power that is enhanced by environmental advantages. Consider something like Russia, when it was at its all-time high, while the attackers always had a tougher time getting through their defenses. During the series, Drachma and forces serve primarily as contacts rather than direct antagonists. They are the excuse that Olivier uses to maintain Fort Briggs' independence from the Central Command. She can't leave the northern border undefended because Drachma would immediately exploit any weaknesses and take over this place. They are the external pressure that keeps the Amestrian military focused outward rather than noticing the homunculi. Next up is Eastern Command, which isn't officially a separate faction, but by the time Roy Mustang is finished reshaping it, it might as well be an independent military force that just happens to wear the Amestrian. They reside in the eastern city, far enough from the central city to have operational independence. Mustang has spent years quietly building a power base of loyal officers who share the same vision as him. They are also called Roy Mustang's loyal crew, but this is where things get interesting from a power dynamics perspective. The Eastern Command doesn't have raw numbers of central or elite reputations of the Briggs, but what it does have is a collection of the most competent and morally driven officers who are no joke. The core of Mustang's faction includes some of the strongest characters, including Lieutenant Riza Hawkeye, who serves as his bodyguard and keeps him grounded, but she is also a sniper capable of taking down targets from distances that even the American sniper would find difficult to handle. Lieutenant John Havoc provides intelligence gathering and has a talent for getting information from unexpected sources. Then the second lieutenant, Hemans Breda, is the group's strategic thinker who analyzes situations and plans operations. There's also this warrant officer, Vato Failman, who has an amazing memory, making him a walking, talking database. And there are many other characters in this group. On paper, this looks like a simple standard command staff, but in reality, it's a conspiracy cell that is operating inside the military structure towards regime change. They're not traitors. They are trying to save Amestris from the actual traitors who have been destroying the Central Command. The line between patriotic reformer and military coup plotter is pretty thin, and Roy Mustang's group is constantly walking it. And above all, Roy Mustang himself is the flame alchemist. Thanks to him, Eastern Command's ranking becomes so high on the list. Every member of Mustang's team would die for the cause that they believe in, and this kind of dedication makes them far more dangerous than any other larger force in the series. Let's say the Central Command is the brain of the Amestrian military power. Then Fort Briggs is the sword, and it has been sharpened on frozen mountains against forces like Drachma for so long that it could probably cut through titanium. They are located in the frozen northern mountains along with the Drachman border, and they operate under conditions that would make most soldiers quit and open a coffee shop somewhere on the eastern side. The fortress is commanded by none other than General Olivier Mira Armstrong, Alex Armstrong's older sister, and quite possibly the single most terrifying officer in the entire Amestrian military. Olivier doesn't just want respect, she demands it at sword point, and if there is a traitor, she will kill him while throwing them in the frozen wasteland to die. She's not cruel for just her personal reasons, but she loves maintaining discipline in conditions where a single mistake can kill an entire unit. Compared to all other factions, the Briggs soldiers are just built differently. They are selected for mental and physical toughness and are trained in archaic survival, while conditioned to fight in environments that could destroy regular troops. Briggs's military also emphasizes survival, adaptability, and absolute ruthlessness in battle. When Ed and Al first arrive at Fort Briggs, they witness this philosophy in action. A soldier failed to meet standards, and Olivier literally had him thrown in the frozen waste as an example. It's brutal, but this just goes to show how only the toughest can survive in Briggs Mountain forces. One of the notable people from the Briggs group includes Captain Buccaneer, who has a cyborg arm with a literal sword built inside. Sure, he can have it. There's also Miles, who is a quartermaster of Ishvalan and serves as a reminder of the absolute complexity of Amestrian imperialism. These soldiers are some of the strongest ones we've seen in the series. Now let's talk about the heavy hitters from the series. It is Amestris Central Command, the heart of Amestrian military power, and arguably the most formidable organization the human force has had in the entire series. This isn't just your average military headquarters, rather they are the most elite soldiers that would make Roy Mustang's group pale in comparison. The Central Command operates under Führer King Bradley, whom most people recognize as the homunculus Wrath, disguised as humanity's most terrifyingly competent leader. This guy literally became the nation's supreme commander through a theatrical selection process, and then ruled for decades without anyone suspecting that he was the bad guy. The power structure here is absolutely stacked. The guy himself, King Bradley, is the strongest of them all, with other people including Roy Mustang, Riza Hawkeye, and Alex Louis Armstrong. The Elric brothers also interact with Central Command constantly throughout the series, but the factions through power become evident during the Promised Day arc. This is where Father's plan reaches its climax, and the Central becomes ground zero for the final battle. Here we see how much firepower this place has. They've got alchemists who can use fire, earth matter, and basically every element that you learned in chemistry class. They even have sniper positions on every rooftop with armor divisions ready to deploy, and enough military command to lock down an entire city. They even have information control, which makes them quite dangerous compared to other organizations and factions. The conspiracy is also running through Central Command, making it even more complicated. Father and the homunculi have been infiltrated at the highest level, meaning that the faction is simultaneously serving human interest and working towards humanity's destruction. This type of diplomatic power is something that no other had, and all the credit goes to King Bradley himself. Central Command's involvement in the major event is basically a checklist of every important moment in the series. The Ishvalan War of Extermination was done by them. They also did the hunter's pursuit of the Elric brothers. The final battle against Father was also thanks to this organization. Now we are at the most powerful faction. Well, not technically a faction in a traditional sense, but a group that is most dangerous in the entire series because they have infiltrated and corrupted every other faction. Father created the 7 homunculi that embody the 7 deadly sins, and each one of them has powers that virtually make them impossible to kill through conventional abilities. Here we need to talk about each character and how they contribute to becoming the strongest of them all. Firstly, we have Pride, who is Sollian Bradley, who served as King Bradley's adopted son while actually being the first homunculus that Father ever created. He can manipulate shadows into blade-like weapons, consume other beings to gain their powers, and operate with complete autonomy while maintaining a perfect disguise as a human child. Throughout the series, he seemed like he was not of any significance, but rather he was the one who was controlling most of this faction. Next up is Wrath, who is King Bradley himself. He is the nation's supreme military commander and a homunculus whose combat abilities are quite overpowered. Bradley can see with the ultimate eye, which is a form of precognition that allows him to predict enemies' movements and their attacks even before they happen. And when you combine it with superhuman speed and master swordsmanship, this becomes functionally unbeatable in single combat. Next up is Lust, who operates as an infiltrator and assassin whose fingers can extend into blade-like weapons that can pierce any armor. She can even virtually regenerate from any wounds instantly, making her almost immune. Roy Mustang only defeats her by literally burning through her Philosopher's Stone reserves, which cannot be done by any other character. Envy is another homunculus that has shape-shifting abilities, allowing her to perfectly mimic any human being. This makes her the ultimate spy, and her sabotaging ability is overpowered. Their combat form is a massive monster that is capable of fighting multiple opponents simultaneously. Envy even started the Ishvalan War by murdering a child while disguised as an Amestrian soldier. They were the ones that led to genocide and created the transmutation circle that Father needed. Gluttony is a failed portal creation experiment that turned into a living weapon. He can devour anyone and anything with his stomach dimension, which can consume matter completely. While not the smartest homunculus, his raw power is destructive and can trap anyone if he wants it enough. Next up is Sloth, who embodies laziness but ironically possesses a super speed that makes him nearly impossible to hit. Killing Sloth requires the combined efforts of Olivier Armstrong, Alex Armstrong, Izumi Curtis, and Sig Curtis. These are 4 of the strongest characters that are working together. Last up is Greed, who can transform his body into an impenetrable carbon shield. This ultimate shield makes him virtually invulnerable to physical attacks. Combined with his combat abilities and tactical intelligence, he is one of the strongest homunculi have challenged Wrath himself. With that, our list of every major faction in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood just ended. Let us know which one you think is the strongest in the series, and if you enjoyed the videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more explainer videos like these.